Welcome back, everybody, to What's Next Beyond Service. This is episode number 41, Mindful Man of the World. And today, our guest is Jon Macaskill. Jon, welcome aboard.
Hey, Scott. Hey, great to be here, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here, as is Sarah and everyone else. So, just a real quick snapshot of Jon. Jon served in the Navy. He had a outstanding career in the Navy. Prior to that, or shouldn't say prior to that, but he began his time in the Navy as an enlisted guy, and then was fortunate enough to go to the United States Naval Academy, which is an extremely big deal. That is an honor to get accepted and then to make it through. So he stayed with the Navy option and then became a SEAL. And the bulk of his time in the Navy was served as a SEAL. He's also a graduate of the Naval Postgraduate School, which is another kind of a big deal. Only smart folks go and finish. So he covered that base as well. After serving in the Navy for 20 plus years, he's doing a number of things. I'm just going to refer to my notes here real quick on that, and then we're going to certainly talk about all this as well. But so he's a mindfulness coach with Movement RX. That's Dr. Teresa Larson and crew. Fantastic folks. So he's obviously doing good things with them. He's also a partner at My Steady Mind. He is a podcast co-founder, co-host, and producer of Men Talking Mindfulness, and that kind of goes back to the title of this podcast, and we'll see some of that too. And then lastly, his take-home job is he's a business development leader, or lead rather, with 3D Media, and that sounds really cool. I've seen some post on that, but we'll talk about that a bit towards the end of our podcast as well. So that's just a real quick snapshot of Jon. And Jon, what I want to do as we get into this interview here is, backstories are always important, right, with folks, because it gains a little bit of interest and buy-in with folks. So that's what I want to do now. Let's talk a bit, and you can start wherever you want. If you want to start with where you were born, because that's kind of a cool thing too.
Yeah.
Whatever significant things go into that, and then let's talk about also your why. What was the impetus for the Navy, and then we'll talk about significant events during your service that you want to share with us. So that'll be the first part of what we're going to accomplish here today. So,
all right, sounds fun. Let's do it.
Yeah.
I'm always a little embarrassed when someone reads my bio, but yeah, I got to be honest. I don't know that I was necessarily smart enough to get into the Naval Academy. I slipped through the cracks, and I realized pretty quickly that I was surrounded by some of this country's best men and women, and definitely lucky enough to get there and then squeak on through. But anyhow,
yeah. Well, hey, I forgot to put modest on here too, because you're being pretty modest. But hey, I would expect nothing less, right?
Well, I appreciate that. Well, so yeah, let's go. I won't give the full drawn out story, but yeah, I was born in South Africa. My parents were also born there, and they go back several generations. Whenever I say I was born in South Africa, everyone asks, well, what were your parents doing there? Well, they were born there, and their parents were born there. So I mean, it's just like a lot of folks here in the U.S. Anyway, we moved to the U.S. when I was 7 years old. Moved to Louisiana, a small town of Ruston, and one of the reasons we left South Africa was to avoid conscription, to avoid the draft for myself and my younger brother. And I joke with my dad to this day that 11 years later or 12 years later, I voluntarily enlisted in the U.S. Navy, which he wasn't thrilled about at first. He thought that there were other options. He's happy and proud of me now, but at that time he was not happy that I had enlisted. Anyway, went through the schooling system there in Ruston, ran track and cross country, and that kind of laid the foundation for a lot of what I believe has led to my success, if you will, in this life is the sports and the training for that particular sport. And then went into the Navy, enlisted, like you said, got picked up to the Naval Academy, and then went from the Naval Academy into SEAL training, and then spent the rest of my time in the Navy as a SEAL, either connected to a SEAL or connected to some type of special operations element, except when I took the break to go to Monterey for the Naval Postgraduate School. And during that time,
Hey,
during
John,
that,
can I
yeah,
ask a quick question?
of course,
Well, actually, I got a comment and then, certainly a question too. And the comment is, I absolutely connect with what you're saying on the sports end. It was the same for me. I was I played football, and then I was a pole vaulter, and if I wasn't doing one, I was doing the other. And, the coaching that was there, the mentors that helped me, become the athlete that I was, that made going to OCS a lot easier because of
sure,
all there's a lot of stuff that goes on in your mind in addition to all the physical, requirements for being in shape, right? But doing those things made that part of the challenge so much easier than if, you wouldn't have gone through that. I'm sure that's part of, what you're saying, but then also
oh yeah,
it sets you up for, kind of the rest of your life if you, stay with that mindset and mentality. And
yeah.
then I guess, and then the question for you is in the Marine Corps, when guys and gals do the NPS option, now maybe it's different, but this is, maybe dated. When they serve in NPS, is there any major shift in their career in terms of what the follow-on is? Because in the Marine Corps, it a lot of times those guys and gals tend not to get command because of the time that they take out of the fleet, and then whatever that follow-on requirement. And I think that's a disservice to the Marine Corps, right? Because there are reasons you send folks to NPS because there are requirements for what follows with their education. But is it the same in the Navy or?
Yeah. So let me just hit on the sports piece first, and then I'll come
Yeah,
back to that. So 100% agree. The sports piece got me in shape to get me through SEAL training and everything else, but it also changed my mindset. And pole vaulters, you guys are crazy, and your mindset. All the pole vaulters that I've ever known have been wild and crazy guys and gals, and they've got a mindset that is all their own. But just being, pushed to and then past your limits as an athlete. I remember, the early morning runs, the 2 and 3 a day workouts, that helps you to really develop a foundation of grit and resilience, which I think is so important as you enter and go through a military career. But I also think it's important in just about everything that we do, whether it's in the military or out.
that's right. Yeah.
And then to answer your NPS question, I went through the operations research program there, and we had a Marine in with us. Now, I will tell you, Naval Special Warfare sent people to Naval Postgraduate School. They go through the defense analysis course, they go through the MBA course, or they go through operations research, and then they go straight back to the teams. It really doesn't alter your military career at all. Until later, you may get picked up for a job that's in line with what you got your master's in. But most of the time, it's hey, you go straight back to the teams. That's where we need you. The rest of the Navy, all the rest of my classmates from the operations research cohort, they had jobs lined up immediately after that were operations research specific. And that Marine that was in our course, the same thing. And he and I have stayed in touch loosely, and I've kind of followed his career, and he did not get command, but he's had a successful military career.
Sure.
So I agree. I think it's a disservice to the service of the Marine Corps to not give those people command, but they are doing what it is they've been trained at the Naval Postgraduate School to do. So in that light, the Marine Corps is at least employing them correctly. The Navy Special Warfare, Naval Special Warfare community, I think they could do a better job of employing us after getting our master's. That said, I was glad that I didn't do anything in the operations research realm and went back to the SEAL teams. I enjoy the SEAL teams. enjoyed what I learned in operations research, and I applaud people who have that degree and go on and do amazing things, but it was not something I wanted to do as a career. So I was
Amen
blessed.
to that. Yeah, well, yeah, hey, there's something to to being an operator and executing, right?
Right.
Because you're with the people that do those things, and that's, for me, that's what I loved about being in the Marine Corps, right?
For sure.
Any headquarters tour or something where you're away from that, is painful.
Yes, I did. I did some staff tours, and they were
Yeah.
exactly that. They were painful. So getting back to the teams was a blessing always.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, I appreciate that. So, cool. Yeah, we'll get back to where you were.
Yeah. So, after my first few tours as a platoon commander and platoon assistant officer in charge, went and did the operations officer and executive officer, and the standard naval special warfare career. But I had my bumps and bruises along the way, and actually toward the end of my career, I'd gotten picked up for command, and got in trouble with the law because at the time my sister had gotten battered by my then brother-in-law, and I called him, and he did not answer the phone, as he's that type of person. And
Right.
then so I sent him a barrage of texts telling him if he laid another hand on my sister that I would pay him a visit. And he didn't like that, so he filed electronic harassment charges against me, and I got brought up on those charges. And long story short, I never took command, and that was actually kind of the driving force behind my leaving the Navy. It was a strange blessing in disguise, though. I mean, everything has worked out for a reason, and I've been blessed since I've left the Navy to work with people like Teresa Larson and My Steady Mind with Seth Hickerson, and the podcast that I'm doing, and then 3D Media, the work that I'm doing there. So there's times when what is happening in the moment, you think, oh, well, this is terrible. It's going to end me. It's going to end my career. And it did end my career, but it didn't end me.
Right.
So it's all about perspective, and I've been blessed beyond reason. So here I am.
No, well, yeah, and hearing you say that like that with a smile on your face, an honest, wholesome smile means so much, because my kids and my wife, but they were always, because I'm that kind of a guy. If that would have been my brother-in-law, I probably would have actually driven over to his house and been arrested there, right? Instead of a long drawn out process. Yeah, stuff like that. And I certainly understand that, because I could just see me. Now, I'm not quite like that anymore because I'm older, right? And I've had my experiences there too. So, man, I understand that in spades. I mean, absolutely. And
Yeah.
but then the follow-on part is all the good things that you're doing now, which is
Right.
really so cool. And that's one of the other reasons I wanted to have you on here. Certainly, you were a SEAL, and that's always kind of a sexy thing, right? Hey, this guy's a SEAL, and you know the deal there. But it's the name of the show is what's next beyond service, right? So service kind of gets you in the door, and then that what next thing, or what's next thing, is really the focus of this. So now, all that being said, these are tough times, right? When you take a look at your career, and then you see things that are happening in society, and how do those things connect with where the military is going, where the economy is going. And so I think right now is probably a really difficult time to transition, because the service is changing, but so is the economy. And where am I going to fit in now in this hopefully kind of post-pandemic-ish world? And what jobs are out there now? There's just so much up in the air. And so when we talk about transition, I certainly like to talk about people's their story of transition. But the more things are changing, and I'm kind of going off on a sidetrack here, the more I'm going to probably want to also talk about how, that's affecting people now in the things that they're doing, right? But so specifically with your transition, what year was it that you wound up retiring from the Navy?
So I retired in August of 2020, but I really started my transition pretty soon after I got in trouble with my brother-in-law. I started making plans, and I was blessed that one of my former bosses, the guy that I had been the executive officer for in Bahrain when he was the commanding officer, and then when I moved back to the States, he was my boss again. He had gotten out several years before me, and he had all the credentials that would have lined him up for a phenomenal job after his naval career. He retired as an 06 Navy SEAL. He had been one of the few Navy SEALs who had gone to Ranger School and Army SF selection, and he had done like everything, right? And when he got out, the job that he got was not what he wanted. It didn't align with his ideals and values. And he came back now as a civilian, and he said he had coffee with me. He said, what are your plans now? Because he was aware of all this trouble that I'd gotten in. And I was like, well, I'm probably going to get out in about 2 years. And he said, well, what are you going to do? I was like, well, I got 2 years to figure that out, boss. I got plenty of time. He's like, no, you don't. You need to start thinking about it now. 2 years is going to evaporate like the blink of an eye. So start thinking of it now. And he told me to, come up with some industries that I was interested in, and he would introduce me to. And I told him initially, I was like, well, I'd like to meet with people in commercial real estate or venture capital or whatever, all these bright and shiny objects that are out there, which are great jobs. Don't get me wrong. I think they're phenomenal jobs. But he set up meetings with these folks. And as I was talking with them, I was like, you know what, this is not what I want to do. So it was just as important to identify what I didn't want to do as identifying what I did want to do. And in that process, like crossing out all these different jobs that I thought I wanted to do, I came across that I wanted to be my own boss. I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and that I wanted to still continue to serve other people in a different way. And all this was happening while I was deepening my meditation practice. I'd been introduced to mindfulness and meditation a while before that. I was practicing, I was learning, I became a teacher, I was helping other people learn about mindfulness and meditation, but never thinking about that as a career, continually thinking about everything else. And then I realized, you know what? The answer is right here in front of my face. I could teach mindfulness and meditation to people to help them heal, to help them go through life with a more fulfilling life, to improve their performance. And so that's what I do now. But it took a while. And I literally, after having coffee with that mentor of mine, I went home, and you'll appreciate this, Scott. I drew out the full 2 years on my calendar and figured out what I needed to do. Did some backwards planning, the full plan of action and milestones, and figured out exactly what I needed to do by August 2020 to make it happen. And that, obviously, that was a plan, and nothing ever goes according to plan, but at least I had a plan to veer from. I had it drawn out on paper for 2 years, and every month I would look at it and say, okay, well, this changed, and I would flex. And that was important to have that, and then start meeting people in the industries that I thought that I may want to do, and realize it was not what I wanted to do.
Right. Yeah. And man, you were so blessed to have had him in your life at that point in time.
Indeed.
You know, how we always talk about how things somehow come together, and maybe there's some higher purpose in some of that, right? But yeah, because that advice was so rock solid. And then what you just said is, sitting down and kind of running the numbers in terms of time and space. Where am I now? What has to happen, in the out months and years? I think most of us in the military, if you're in long enough, you become proficient at planning. So, heck yeah, use that resource smartly for, projecting where you're going to be, because you're leaving.
Right.
You don't necessarily always know what you're going to do. And I think a lot of folks don't know that. And that unknown can be scary, right? I mean, you can be a real badass guy, but still that unknown hey, I'm leaving everything that I am, everything I know. For some folks, that's a real, that's an earth shaker. But yeah, wanting the ability to have someone like him to connect you in industries and make that initial connection, that is huge. And I know from experience, and I know from certainly, talking with people, that a lot of it is who you know and who knows you, right? I mean,
Right.
you have to
Right.
you have to have a level of competency. That kind of goes, with things, but having those connections makes a difference, because a lot of hiring that's done is, internal hiring. But if somebody inside knows someone, and that really smooths the way over sitting there with a shotgun blast with resumes across the industry, hoping you get lucky, which doesn't happen very often. But
Right.
hey, something, looking at your LinkedIn profile, the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth,
Yeah.
when did that come into play? Because that's a huge thing too. I
Yeah.
think I want to say that oh geez, what's his name? Herb Thompson. I think
Yeah. Herb. Yeah.
yeah, I think he attended that as well.
Sure
And
did.
a lot of really smart folks and people that we're all kind of connected with on LinkedIn. Know a bunch of folks that have done that. So what was that all about?
Yeah. So that's it's a 10-day crash course at Dartmouth's business school, which is Tuck. And so the program is called Tuck Next Step, and it's a very unique program. And it goes back to the planning that I'd done. I was blessed to know some people who'd gone through this program before, and I plugged it in to my transition 2 years, or at
Right.
least planned on it being a part of it. And it did. It came to fruition. I was lucky enough, blessed enough to have that work out. But what Tuck Next Step is it's a program for either transitioning service members or soon to be transitioning service members, recently transitioned service members, and transitioning elite athletes. So about half the cohort is service members or veterans, and the other half is elite athletes. And at first you're like, well, what do they have in common? Well, they've got a lot in common. They've been hyper focused on one mission their entire lives. They've been identified as, I was identified as the SEAL. I went home one time, and my sisters introduced me to one of their friends, and they're like, hey, this is my brother, the SEAL. Instead of this is my brother, John, instead of this is my brother, blah, 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 this is my brother, the SEAL. And
Yeah, that's your identity. That's
that
right.
was my identity, right? And that's truly how I saw myself too, was I was the SEAL. And that's what people in the military kind of define themselves as. You become your uniform, you become your rank, you become all the ribbons and medals that you wear. It's kind of inevitable. There's a time when you walk into a room of complete strangers, but you're wearing a uniform, and they know just about everything that you've done. They know the places that you've been. They know the rank. They know blah, blah, blah. They know all this stuff about you. And now, as a civilian, you walk into a room and nobody knows who you are, and it's completely different. The same thing with those elite athletes, right? They were gold medalists, professional football players, professional NBA players. And they come in, people know who they are. And then suddenly their careers come to a grinding halt, or they retire, and now what? And so they need to figure out what's next for them too. So that's why it's called Tuck Next Step, is literally taking that next step. So it's 10 days at Tuck. It's like a crash course on business, a crash course on entrepreneurship, and it's a great networking opportunity with those business teachers at Tuck, the elite athletes, the other military service members and veterans. It's fantastic. It's absolutely one of the best things I did in my transition, along with, I'll mention two others, the Commit Foundation and the Honor Foundation. And I will say that if you're looking to transition, make sure that you get connected with more than what the service branch offers you. Look outside of that and do your homework, find what's out there, and you can set yourself up for amazing success afterwards. And that's what I was, again, fortunate enough to do, was go through those programs.
All right. Yeah. And that's a tremendous story. It sounds like, for you, the the process went very well. It sounds like you also owned the process, right?
Yeah.
Talking about Herb Thompson, he says, own your journey. And
Right.
that's so true, right? That's fundamental and foundational. And yeah, last week, my previous interview, Lana Spizzo, she is a leadership coach. She was in the Army for about almost 10 years, 9+ years. But so she works with veterans, right? But she also works with pro athletes. And what you just said, she talked about that same thing about how that whole identity thing, transitioning from being a high speed hockey player to John Q. Public,
Yeah.
right? And and not all of them are necessarily very famous either. So they do time, and if they get injured or they move on, it's a very different world for them,
Right.
when that uniform comes off. It's so much like what we experience. And the program, the Tuck program there, that is a neat, that combining those folks, that was very smart. That's
Yeah. It's
a lot of intrigue in some of that
yeah,
too.
there's a mutual admiration, right? Like the day one, all these athletes that have been to the Olympics together, or they've been whatever, they know one another. They're all standing on one side of the room, and the rest of us, all the military folks, are standing on the other side of the room, and we're sharing stories about where we've been, what we've done, blah blah blah. And then the second day, you start classes, and you don't get to choose where you sit. Because the natural thing, birds of a feather flock together. All the military people would sit on one side and all the athletes would sit on the other. You sit in assigned seating, and they've intentionally set you next to an athlete, then a military member, athlete, military member, and you start talking and kind of comparing notes. And it's incredible. Like, we as mere mortals have this vision that these elite athletes have it all made. They don't. A lot of them, if they're not in the top 3 in the world, like I sat next to a gold medalist swimmer, and she fell out of the top 3 in the world, and she instantly loses her stipend. And when I say falling out of the top 3 in the world, I'm not saying top 3 in America, top 3 in the world. And when you fall out of that top 3, it could be by thousandths of a second. And even that stipend is not a lot of money. So you still have to feed yourself. You still have to have a roof over your head. If you have a vehicle, you got to pay that. You've got all these regular things, and you're not making money. It's incredible what some of these athletes go through in order to do what they do, to represent America at the highest levels, or to play in the NFL or the NBA. It's incredible. But there's this mutual respect, right? Because of that same thing that we experience, hyper focus on one thing for so long, and then loss of identity, like sudden loss of identity, loss of purpose, loss of mission, which is, that's a huge piece for those transitioning out of the military, is that loss of purpose, loss of identity, loss of mission. And so there's a lot of similarities there for sure.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and that's an absolute theme with this program too. In terms of that what's next thing, because I think most of us can go through a checklist, right? Some are probably a little more involved in how they manage that process, but it's not too hard, right? You can figure out, okay, I know I got to do this, 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 and here's the timeline for that. You can execute that.
Yeah.
But it's all these other things, life continues to happen too.
Right.
So you're trying to manage that while life is doing its thing. And then if you're not sure what you want to do, again, kind of getting back to the uncertainty, there's things that happen, like stress, and trying to manage that process. And maybe if you're married, maybe you're having problems at home, or your kids are about to leave the nest, and then that's a transition thing too. I mean, there's so many things can impact folks as they're going through this process. And so talking along those lines, aside from the what you can quantify as, yeah, I got to do this. What were some of those challenge things that maybe popped up with you? Did you have any of those issues? Most of us do. So things that were maybe challenging, or any realizations that you came to as you were going through transition.
Yeah. I mean, again, I planned it all out, but that doesn't mean everything goes according to plan. And that also doesn't mean that I had everything in the plan. One of the big things that even having gone through these transition programs, one of the big things that I struggled with, yes, there's the loss of purpose, loss of mission, loss of identity. Wherever you go, whatever transition program you go through, you're going to hear that. And that's something that you got to prepare for. But the one thing that I really struggled with was the sense of abandonment. And it's really on both sides. Like, I felt that I was leaving my brothers and sisters behind to go on and continue a fight. I knew that I was going to continue to lose brothers and sisters in the fight after I had left, and I had nothing to do about it. I could do nothing about it. I was no longer a part of it. So you feel as though you're abandoning your brothers and sisters. The flip side of that coin is you leave, and then the train keeps going, the mission keeps going, the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Army, the Air Force, the Coast Guard, it keeps going. It's got a mission, it's a machine, and it keeps going. And you feel that you've been abandoned. And, you know, specifically, I retired in August of 2020. The pandemic was still, you know, pretty high. And I left, and I literally got a text from my boss saying, "Thanks for your service." There was no retirement ceremony. There was no high fives, because we weren't even going into the office at the time. We were working from home in the military.
Wow.
And so it was very bizarre. So like, I felt that I had abandoned this team, this unit, this element that I'd been a part of for 24 years. And now I felt that they had abandoned me. It was like this two-sided coin. And that was a piece that nobody had talked about in any transition process, and I was not ready for. So I was sad, even with, so I, again, teach mindfulness and meditation, and people are like, "Oh, well, then you're very stoic. You don't get sad. You don't get depressed. You don't get stressed. You don't get anxious." Yes, I do. I get all those, but that's it. I get those. I get sad. I get upset. I get stressed. I get anxious, but that doesn't mean I am that. I don't define myself as that. And so I got sad that I had been abandoned, and that I had abandoned my brothers and sisters. And that's a very important part that I wish was talked about more often and more openly.
Yeah, I agree. That's very deep, and it's real, you know, and people absolutely feel that. And you know, Stoicism, I think is huge, right? I mean, that really in this career field, I think it's a requirement. But so is understanding it the way you just explained it. You know, that okay, yeah, we are people, we're human, and so that element's there. It doesn't go away. It's how you handle, how you process those things, you know, daily, and then certainly moving forward. I know, you know, for me, I was, and this is going back a few years, but you know, the Marine Corps took over Afghanistan in around 2010 timeframe, and I was with 3rd Marine Air Wing. I was the deputy for aviation ground support. First time I had been on the air side. You know, I'd been a ground guy my whole career, and man, that was a heck of an experience. I learned so much, you know, with the aviators. You know, the swing with the wing, that's a bunch of baloney. Those guys are some of the most professional people you're going to ever run across. You know, certainly safety is an important thing when you're flying multi-million-dollar aircraft. You know, and so they're very serious. And they have fun, but they're professionals. And so I learned a lot. But so where I'm going with this, Jon, is as we are preparing to move all of our stuff stateside into Afghanistan, you know, all of our equipment, all of our people, you know, letting contracts for, you know, building expeditionary airfields, you know, along with the airport, you know, a lot going on. I was going to deploy. I was going to be the guy doing logistics for 3rd MAW. And then I got picked up for command, and the timelines didn't match, you know. And so I went to the boss, the general, and said, you know, "Hey, sir." He goes, "Oh no, hey, congratulations on, you know, picking up command." And he goes, "Now I need to find a replacement for you." And I was like, "Well, that's what I want to talk about, sir. I put a lot of time into this, and I know if I go forward that you'll have to replace me in, like, you know, 2 or 3 months." He goes, "And that's why you're not going forward." And I was like, "Wow." He goes, he goes, "Scott, I get it." He said, "But, you know, I'm not going to, you know, I want to take you, but it makes no sense." He goes, "Because then you'll be there. Then I got to get someone." He goes, "So you're not going. So, you know, batten down the hatches here and get ready for command." And wow, I was pissed, you know, but then again, okay, he's a 2-star general. I'm a lieutenant colonel, so okay, Roger that. But the abandonment piece is where I'm going with all this. Man,
Sure.
I felt like I abandoned all the Marines that are going to go forward now without me. And I mean, they understood it, right? It's the way
Yeah.
things work. But wow, that was a horrible feeling. I still sometimes even kind of think about that. Not, I mean, I guess I could have said, well, hey, I'm not taking command and, I'm going to go, I could have done that, right? But
Right.
that's not what I did. But yeah, I mean, that is such a real feeling of, and it's a double-edged sword for sure.
It does. It
But,
is
but
absolutely.
yeah, but fantastic, point on your part. And thanks for bringing that up, because that's something that I actually haven't talked about here, in all the 41 episodes that I've had, to include, we also do open mic sessions here as well. So I probably have like 60, ish episodes, and that's never come up. And thanks for
Yeah.
pointing that out.
Yeah. I
I think
know.
that's a
Well,
big deal.
I I actually had somebody point it out to me. I was feeling lost and angry and frustrated, and somebody was like, "Are you feeling like you've betrayed or abandoned your brothers and sisters?" And I was like, "Yes, you nailed it." And I'm gonna get emotional here even thinking about
No,
it.
yeah,
Yeah, like
yeah, I get
that's
that.
exactly, he nailed it. And then and then I was like, and that they're abandoning me and I'm being
Yeah,
left behind. And it was this really tough, like I was angry at them, but I was also angry at myself. And so yeah, it's a tough situation. And if you don't know what it is that's causing that angst that inside you, it's even more difficult to deal with. So one thing I recommend to people, yes, obviously, again, the mindfulness and meditation, but they find a counselor to go and talk to about the process of transition, and whether that's military transition, whether that's personal transition in maybe you're going through a divorce, maybe you're going through a professional transition, whatever
yeah,
transitions, major transitions that we have in our lives. Having kids, that's a major transition. Going and finding someone to talk to about that and what it is you're experiencing, that's, I think, huge for your mental health, but also, yeah, definitely for your mental health, but also to help you get through that transition more effectively and more successfully.
yes, man. You were so on with that, and I absolutely know this is true for your community. I mean, just like it is for being Marines. Everyone's an alpha, right?
I
Some more than others. And then, you know, bringing mindfulness in and bringing, okay, look, yeah, I know there's this part of me, but there's also this part of me. And
Right.
how do those things reconcile? And how much of this are you going to share with this and the others, right? Because sometimes that's just not what folks care about or want to hear. But, we all have to figure that part out. And being smart enough, being brave enough, having the awareness to say, yeah, you know what, I think I do need help, whether it's with transition or other things, right, that we
Yeah.
face in life, finding the right person to engage with and figure those things out are so important. And the way you explain that about how somebody pointed it out to you, you were feeling these things, you weren't sure what the heck's going on.
Right.
Then somebody says, well, what about this? you know just real quick, and I've shared this, I think, a couple times on previous episodes, but uh, when my youngest daughter, left to go to college, and I got two daughters. First one left, it was tough, but I had my youngest daughter, right? And so, but when she left, the house was quiet. All the things that I did as a dad were, I'm not that dad anymore, because I'm
Yeah.
not, right? They're now adults, they're gone. And I didn't know, I was in a funk, and I didn't know why. And the gal that had been cutting my hair for years, 'cause I've been out since 2012, and I've been living in the same community. One day she's like, "Hey, Scott, can I ask you a question?"
Mm.
Yeah, what's up? She's like, "Well, it's kind of a personal question." I'm like, "Okay, are you okay?" Well, what do you mean? She goes, well, you used to come here all the time. You're upbeat. You
Mm,
always have, a couple funny stories and we always chat. She goes, the past couple of times you've been very quiet and like you're reflecting, everything okay? And I was like, she goes, you miss Taylor, don't you? And it's like this light came on and I'm like, wow. I mean,
yeah,
as dumb as that sounds, I mean, that should be like so easy to figure out, and I've had a crazy life, but I've never been depressed. And I always was like, come on, man, but holy smokes, I was depressed.
yeah,
And she identified that root cause. And then I knew what to do. Right.
right.
And that's, it's so powerful having, whether it's, somebody that is just a casual acquaintance who, and hey, she was my barber. So, we talked about all kinds of stuff. It's like a bartender, right?
Yeah.
But man, she nailed that, just like you said, and then holy smokes. But that's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
And I think as military members, and I would even narrow that down even further, more specifically to those who have masculine energies. We get wrapped up in the next mission, right? Like, what's the next mission, whether that's a military mission or the next life mission. And so when we left the military, I was like, okay, well, the next mission is to get my family settled in Colorado Springs. My next mission is to get a job. My next mission is to get my wife settled, or help her to get settled, rather, because she can very much do that on her own, but I could help her.
Right.
So
Yeah, I understand.
those were what was like right there in front of my face. But what was even closer was the fact that I was feeling this abandonment, and the fact that I had abandoned the team, but I couldn't see it. I couldn't see it because I was looking at these next missions. And that's probably what was happening with you. And hey, okay, yeah, so this was a check in the box. Get the kids out of the house. Check, done it. All right, what's the next? What's next, right?
Right,
So
yeah.
what's that next box? And you weren't even thinking about how checking that other box, like how that affected you. And I'm on the other end of that spectrum right now. I've got 3 young kids. I've got a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
I find myself at times saying, oh man, I can't wait until they leave for college. And as soon as that comes into my mind, I'm like, yes, you can. Don't wish away this time. I know that the other side of this spectrum is going to be more difficult in other ways. Enjoy this time that you have with these beautiful little kids. But that comes full circle. When I was in the military, I remember, man, I can't wait until I retire. Don't get me wrong, I love this job, but I can't wait until I retire. And then when I retired, I was like, oh man, I really miss that kid, right? That kid being in the military.
Sure.
So there's so many parallels and all these different transitions that we go through.
Yeah, there are, and the human element is there, right? You cannot take that out. All these things that it's kind of like sometimes the grass may appear to be greener, not necessarily, and it's not always that. But yeah, what you said is exactly right. And when I went back and looked at my timeline, my plan, after Taylor left, there was this line that just went straight down. I'm like, where did that come from?
Yeah,
kidding, of course, but I didn't plan for that, and that's what really when that realization hit me too. I'm like, what an idiot! Why was I not thinking about it was like in passing, but I didn't sit down. I wasn't rigorous with, okay, yeah, this is coming. You're not going to be, the president of the lacrosse, team.
Yeah.
What's it called? Date
Club,
myself here, but what's that?
the lacrosse club, or
Yeah. My daughter played lacrosse in high school. She played soccer. I was involved. I coached. I was, on the road with her, and again, all that ends in a day too, just like your uniform coming off in a day. And so yeah, it really caught me off guard. But enough about me. But hey, man, with your kids, and I was told this years ago when I was at a restaurant. And my wife and I were there, and my youngest, who she was a pistol. Now my oldest rather. My youngest was pretty much, she liked to please. She was, she was easy. Oldest one was like, man, she's ready to go. And I had to take her outside, and have a little chat with her to remind her, okay, we're not at home. Other people are here. They're trying to enjoy their meal, and we are too. And I just tried to, reason with her. And
Yeah.
2 minutes later, I had to go back outside again. And so then this older gentleman was walking by, and he tapped me on the shoulder. He said, son, he said, the days are long, but the years are fleeting.
Yeah.
And he winked at me, and I was like, oh, wow, okay. And then I had to take her back outside again. But
Man.
but that did stick with me, and I share that with people too. When I see the same things, it does. And I saw Sarah, text in there that it goes, too fast in all capitals, and she knows too, right? It really does. But well, let me see here. It's wow, it's like 11:47. So hey, let's do this. I think we've thoroughly covered, some very important elements there transition wise. Let's talk about, some of the things, after service and the things that you're doing now. You're working with Dr. Larson. You're also with the what was it?
My Steady Mind.
Yeah, yeah. What are those things? I mean, I know what Dr. Larson's doing.
Sure.
I don't really know the other. Tell us about some of that, what you're doing now.
Well, I'll tell you what Dr. Larson and I do for the sake of your audience,
Sure.
and then a little bit about what we do with My Steady Mind. So, Dr. Teresa Larson is a Marine veteran and turned doctor of physical therapy, and she's had her own mental health challenges, and I say that comfortably because I know she shares it openly. But
Absolutely.
She and I work together to bring movement, which she teaches, and how important movement for the body is. But in healing the body, you can heal the mind. So she brings the movement piece in, and then mindfulness, as you heal the mind, that you can heal the body. So really the two go together hand in hand. And we teach seminars in person, we teach online webinars, and then we have a program called the Mindfulness and Movement Experience that is online, available for people online. So her program, or rather her company, is Movement RX, and I partnered with Movement RX to run those different programs. Then My Steady Mind is a mental resilience, a mindfulness training, a cognitive fitness company. It's what we call it, cognitive fitness, because mindfulness and meditation, though it's gaining acceptance in the Western world, there's still this stigma that surrounds those words.
Right.
So cognitive fitness is what we teach at My Steady Mind, and that's founded by a dual veteran, a Navy and Air Force veteran, Dr. Seth Hickerson. He's a sports psychologist, and we have a 9-week program in that we run people through to help them deal with a lot of the same things: stress, anxiety, performance improvement, those types of things. And then I run a podcast with a good friend of mine, Will Schneider. It's called Men Talking Mindfulness, and it's just a weekly episode that we put out there on YouTube and all the different podcast platforms. And it literally started as two guys just chatting on Instagram live, and we had no idea, no agenda, nothing. And then people were like, "Oh, you should start this as a podcast." And we ripped off the audio from Instagram Live. And if you ever listen to the podcast, the first few episodes on there are atrocious as far as audio quality. But we've gotten better since then. I mean, I've got a professional mic right here.
Yeah,
so,
that's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
yeah, Sarah, I see your comment there. That is how we started. As a matter of fact, even backing up further, it was just two guys. Every month we'd jump on the phone and have a conversation as to what our challenges were with our own mindfulness and meditation journeys. And then we were like, you know what, maybe somebody else wants to hear this. Maybe somebody else is struggling with these same challenges. And it turns out there is an audience out there that enjoys the show. And then, so those are some of the things. And then 3D media. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask real quick. So how did you meet Dr. Larson, Teresa, and then Seth? How did that all come about?
I have met,
Yeah.
I have met everybody that I work with, whether it's Dr. Teresa Larson, Will, or Seth, or 3D Media, all through LinkedIn. Every single one of them has been
Man,
through through a LinkedIn connection, either directly
that's a
or
huge endorsement
indirectly.
there.
Yeah, I
That's
know,
a big
right?
deal.
I am not
That's
getting
so
paid by
cool.
LinkedIn.
Right. Yeah. There's no logo in the corner up here. No, but I
Yeah,
mean, hey, that doesn't that say a lot? That's tremendous. Wow. Yeah.
yeah,
I tell you, I've been blessed too, Jon, with the folks that I've connected with, that, I've built dialogue and then, eventual friendship with, in addition to, doing things work-wise with people that I've met on LinkedIn. I think it's a tremendous tool.
oh,
It's,
it is.
if you leverage it and understand it for what it is,
Yeah,
it absolutely is.
yeah. I mean, we were chatting before you hit record. So in November of 2020, my brother-in-law almost passed away, and I put a post on LinkedIn that allowed us to get what we needed to save him. And then just this week, 2 days ago, my car was stolen. And I asked my wife, I was like, should I post this on LinkedIn? She's like, no, don't. That's not professional. It's not a professional. I was like, I'm just going to do it. And I posted a picture of my car and said it had been stolen. And this morning, somebody reached out to me on LinkedIn. They're like, hey, we found your car at Woodland Park. The cops have it. And there were 2 felons that were driving it. Those felons are going away. And I got my car back. I literally have it. I'm staring at the window at it right now. so LinkedIn can be pretty powerful for professional reasons, but also for personal. So it's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's understanding how to leverage it, right? And I mean, that's a crazy story. I mean, it really is. And we were kind of joking about, what Einstein is going to steal a bright yellow black stripe car like that, right?
Yeah,
it can be under the radar. No one's going to know. Yeah,
right. They would have been better off stealing a gray Honda Accord or something.
Yeah, exactly. That's funny.
That's what Sarah drives, apparently.
That's right.
There you go.
Yeah, and those are easy to find in the parking lot too. So
yeah.
Wow. No, that's LinkedIn's incredible. Now, Jon, we're sneaking up on an hour here. We're like at 53 minutes. Can you tell us a little bit about 3D Media? What they do and your role. Anything you want to share with them specifically?
Sure, absolutely. And it seems kind of out of line with everything else that I'm doing. So what I do with Teresa, what I do with Seth, what I do with Will is all mindfulness. And then I've got this random thing over here with 3D Media. And 3D Media is a company that does virtual reality and augmented reality. And the last job that I had in the Navy, just as after I'd gotten in trouble, they kind of stashed me away. They made me the director of innovation and research and development for the Navy Reserve. So I got involved in a lot of technology and a lot of artificial intelligence, machine learning kind of stuff, and stuff that I never really thought that I had an interest in, but I found that I did. And
you also have a degree in mathematics, right?
I do. Yeah.
Okay. Well, there you go.
Yep.
Don't hold up. Don't.
Yeah. Yep. So I did some coding in the mathematics side and the operations research side. I did some coding there, and I have an understanding of that, though I'd never call myself a coder or a developer. But yeah, so I got introduced to the CEO. I was having typical entrepreneurial struggles where I was having great months and then months where I had zero income. And I reached out to their CEO, Daryl Roy. It's a company in Louisiana, funny enough, where I grew up, not in the same town, but same state. And I was like, hey, man, I'd love to know more about your company. Is there anything that I could do to help out? And again, this was a connection I made on LinkedIn. And he's like, absolutely. We'd love to have you to help to develop our business. And the company was founded. So this is where it all comes back together. The company was founded after one of Daryl's friends at a nuclear power plant turned a valve the wrong way, ended up killing himself, his supervisor, and hurting a lot of others. And Daryl founded the company 3D Media to bring virtual and augmented reality into the training world so people can become proficient more efficiently and ultimately bring home people at the end of every day safely. And that aligns with my ideals and values. I was like, yes, I want to help out doing that, bringing people home
Man.
safely at the end of every day. That's right there. So that's why I have that. It scratches my tech itch, and it's aligned with my ideals and values. I couldn't say no. So there you go.
Well, that's incredible. I mean, that's a big deal. I mean, that is huge to be able to bring that together, and it was what you did too, right? In being a SEAL and just like being a Marine, operational risk management is, that is one of your priorities, right? Because you
Yeah.
want to make sure that you bring folks home, that you're
Right.
doing things the right way. And I mean, some of those lessons learned are horrible lessons learned because people die or they get injured. And so, if you can mitigate those things through leveraging the technology that you guys
Yeah.
are bringing to bear there, I mean, that's worth its weight in gold. And that's,
Absolutely.
and alignment, that whole alignment thing, that's, if you can find something that is a paying gig and it aligns with your values and you enjoy getting up and seeing your face every morning before you begin your day, that's, I mean, hey, that's
Yeah.
really, so,
It's huge.
it seems to me, Jon, that you've really got a lot of good things happening. There's, and of course, not that, life can't do what life does, right? But it sounds like you've really built around you some good things. In addition to having a fantastic wife and kids, you have these other things that you're building and that you're sharing with other people. I think that is so tremendous, and that's so important too as a human to be able to help people. The goodness that it brings to the people you help, and then what comes back to you right here and here, with realizing, wow, hey, that's cool. I'm helping somebody, and that really feels good.
Right. Sure
It's just
does.
that loop that is fulfilling for all involved, and it's great to see that you are there. Because hey, things could have gone a whole nother way.
Oh yeah.
With your time, at the end of service and in transitioning. And it's great to see that you've been able to pull it together, and again, you mentioned that your wife is very capable, absolutely.
More
And I know
more
what you
than.
meant I know what you meant when you said you help get her settled, but yeah, but hey, man, that is the other side of this, right? Is our spouses and what they bring. Because a lot of, now I know that she served in the military too, but
Did.
a lot of spouses that don't serve just don't get recognition.
Right.
They're serving right along with us, and your kids are too, because they've got to move, and dad's not there or mom's not there, and so there's challenges there that most folks just don't understand. Just like those professional athletes or the folks that are training for the Olympics, all those things that are happening that just no one, you know,
Right.
not that they don't care, they just don't
No.
understand that those things are happening. You got the same thing
Sure.
with the military families, and
Sure.
so yeah, that's great. I'm very happy for you, and
Thank you, brother. I
keep,
appreciate it.
yeah, no, and I'm telling you, man, some folks you can just see a kind of an aura about them. You're one of those guys, and it's just, you know, it's what you see is what you get, and it's all very positive, and it's like, okay, cool, I can relate to that,
Oh, I
So,
appreciate that, Scott. Back at you, man. Back at you.
yeah, well, yeah, man, I appreciate that. Well, now before we're right at 11:59, and I do have one question. I want to ask. This is kind of not a silly question, but it's a question, right? I used to live in Colorado. I lived in Colorado Springs. My dad was in the Air Force. We were at the academy. He wasn't a student, but he worked at the academy, right, in the Air Force. And that was the best place that in all the places we were stationed. I love that place. And if I wasn't here, I'd probably be in Colorado, right? What brought you to Colorado?
Well, all my Naval Academy brothers and sisters are going to beat me up for this. But if I had traveled to the Air Force Academy campus before I went to the Naval Academy, I probably would have gone into the Air Force.
Yeah,
I love Colorado Springs. I love Colorado. There's so much to do all year round. The campus there is beautiful. You can get into the mountains in a second. I love Annapolis. I love West Point, but Colorado Springs, it just has something that called my name. The mountains were calling me, right?
yeah,
So they were calling me.
yeah.
And so I responded to that call. I lived by the ocean my whole naval career. My wife had lived by the ocean her whole naval career, and we had visited the mountains. So we flipped the script. We live by the mountains now and we visit the ocean.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Kind of same here. A lot of time on the East Coast, on the water, being a Marine, obviously, or, kind of amphibious, right? But where we live now, we live in the valley, and there's mountains all around. The ocean is west, and it's as the crow flies, it's maybe 30 miles. So if we want to do that, we're there. If we want to go up in the mountains, we're there. In the summertime, it's beautiful here. In the wintertime, there's snow in the mountains, and I've got flowers throughout my yard, and
Yeah.
it's very temperate. But Colorado, and I can see any vantage point of Pikes Peak, and I know it's Pikes Peak, right?
Yep.
And it looks different from different angles, but yeah, there is something about those mountains. And as a kid, you know, we would go all the time, well, not all the time, but we would go quite often on to the academy and watch the students march, and just all the different events. My dad was a musician, so he was in the marching band, he was in the jazz band, he was in the orchestra, and so we got to go to all of those things.
Yeah.
It was just fantastic, and as a kid, I was thinking I would, that's the path I wanted, but my grandfather was a Marine. And so then there you go. But no, well, thanks for answering that. I always kind of wondered, what your connection was there, and I get it big time. So
Yeah, it's
cool.
awesome.
All right. Well, I know you see that a few minutes, so for Q&A. So let's go ahead and push to that. So in doing that, I'm going to bring Sarah in. Sarah, as you always do so well, I know you have some things to say, and then you're going to lead us into Q&A. So here you go.
Okay, I have 2 pages of notes, so I had to really kind of think through, okay, which can we talk about? Jon, I always appreciate you. When you came on, when this first started, I appreciate the spirit, just like what Scott just mentioned about you. I think it just exudes. I think we all see it. So I just want to thank you for that, just bringing who you are. And there's just a couple of comments, that, when you talked about the abandonment and grief, I was just talking to Lana, the woman who was on last week with Scott. We had this great conversation yesterday, and I said, hearing all these stories over 2 years for first responders and the veterans, it is that grief or even the betrayal that kind of gets slid over. And I started noticing that after a while and started trying to kind of bring that up in both arenas. And I just appreciated that you brought that up, because I think that's so powerful and so deep that can really affect us when we're not understanding what that is or calling it by name so that we can deal with it. And I just want to say too, I think it really touched my heart when you talked about that incident that ended your career. It's interesting on paper that may have ended your career, but the reason why, and this is why I love storytelling, you get to see the whole picture. It is your heart and your empathy to be a protector, that this happened. That was, part of that. And I think also being on the first responder, like with David, to hear about everything that happens through domestic violence, what happens to the woman, what happens to the police officer that has to respond to these calls. So many of, when people hit that day can happen around domestic violence. So I just want to acknowledge that, that the why that happened, I think is why we all appreciate you so much. I have loved Men in Mindfulness whenever I can pop on. I've just enjoyed it so much. Even Teresa Larson also, this is why I have this awesome bottle.
Oh, yeah.
With my little flip top.
Same. Same.
There we go. So, even if we're not always seen on each other's, venues, I think there's a wonderful connection happening. So I just want to thank you so much, Jon. I'm going to leave it at that. I could say much more.
Thank you, Sarah. That means a lot to me, and I appreciate that. And I don't think I've ever really peeled back the onion on the why behind why I got in trouble. I was angry and frustrated with myself for a while because I thought I'd ended my career, and again, like I said, I did. But the why behind it was important, and I feel like I protected my sister, and for you guys, she is away from that guy. She is safe. she and her son are in a great place now, and it's all a great story in the long run.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
amen. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. So glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any comments or questions?
I saw Jon Polanco, is it?
Yes, sir.
Made some comments there.
Yeah,
Funny
there
enough,
is.
that's where Boise is where my sister-in-law, or not my sister, my sister lived before when all that happened. So I've spent some time in Boise at the courthouse, all for the wrong reasons. but I also saw your comment there in regards to how you can find out about what Teresa and I do in regards to mindfulness, meditation, and everything else. And we literally just wrapped up a course for first responders in Tucson for the Quell Foundation. And we are just blown away by what first responders, coming back to what Sarah just mentioned, what first responders experience on a daily basis. So we want to help out. So Jon, if you're at all interested, just look my name up, Jon Macaskill, just like it's spelled right there, .com.
I did.
Yep. It's right there. And then we have, if you look up jonmacaskill.com/links, it will take it'll take you to all the things that Scott mentioned as far as My Steady Mind, Movement RX, the courses that we offer, those kinds of things.
I went on to actually your LinkedIn profile.
Oh, right on.
I've heard of you before because I also follow Vets to Industry, and I remember sometime last year you did
I did a talk
one of their talk sessions, which is really great. I definitely want to thank you. A lot of what you were talking about with you describing the different programs and different things that you're doing now with all these different groups, especially that. You know, I run a local nonprofit chapter, Honoring the Heroes Idaho, which Sarah knows because she knows Ryan Jones. Honoring the Heroes focuses on providing first responders with tactical style military bags that has books, resources, and materials to help strengthen and encourage their emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being.
Oh, that's awesome.
So when we share that, we donate those bags to first responders. But when I engage with a lot of the first responders, police officers, firefighters, paramedics, dispatchers, correction officers, and I talk to the leadership, I always explain, you know, reading material is always great, but I personally feel engaging with people on a personal level is where you really get to understand where do you go from here and how do you connect.
Right.
And so doing a lot of things where we tend to do very well with staying physically fit, but how well are we doing staying mentally fit? And so a lot of the things that you were talking about, very intriguing, because then now that could be another resource that I can also mention to the first responders I engage with to let them know these are the key things. These are things that you should do. This is a way for you to incorporate both the physical and the mental side of fitness and resiliency so that you can continue doing the things that you're looking at doing.
Exactly.
And for a lot of us, it's a lot about doing the job. You know, a lot of us, we feel like we're destined to do being in the military like I was, or being a first responder like a lot of the first responders I engage with. So how do we make sure that you are able to continue doing that, even though you're maybe dealing with certain things that you're struggling with emotionally, mentally, spiritually? And so we want to make sure that we provide as much resources for them as possible.
Beautiful, man. Good for you. And thanks for what you're doing. That's awesome. Because we owe it to them. We owe it to them.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and Jon Polanco, I was just checking your LinkedIn profile because I was thinking you were an Army guy, and I was right. Yeah. So, hey, belated happy birthday to you, brother.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah, I spent 17 years in the Army. First 4 years was in the reserves out of New York City. Did a deployment in OIF 3 in 2006 with a military police battalion. Very cool. That's why I always tell people I have that connection, not only just the fact that I'm a veteran, but I would say about 55% of the unit that I was deployed with in the reserves, they were NYPD police officers.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Wow.
So it was like they go from doing their job as a first responder every day to now you're deploying as a military police officer, doing corrections, right?
Yeah.
But then after that, you know, I came back from deployment, and in 2008 went active duty, spent a little over 13 years active, and then I medically retired from the Army in 2020. So when you mentioned 2020, I retired officially February 24th, 2020. So.
Oh, wow. So just before the pandemic really ramped up here.
Yeah. And it was a big transition for me as well doing it. But I look at things like you talk about trying to find your purpose, trying to find your way, trying to find where you go through. When you go through medical retirement, it's like, that's a halt. You know,
Yeah.
you're going to be getting out. You're no longer going to be going towards 20 years of service, and you got to figure things out. And I literally moved my family to Boise. Never even been here. Never visited here or anything. Just, hey, you got transition orders. Thank you for your service. Happy retirement. And just moved, 5-day road trip, got here. Where do I go from here? And I was able to make things happen. Now I'm actually a senior HR corporate recruiter for a global staffing company. And then I stay involved in my local community with being a part of the Idaho Veterans Chamber of Commerce, being a part of
Scott, that's your next guest right there.
Yeah, I was
next guest.
John, I was thinking the same thing. You know, great
Well, when I,
minds
as a
part think alike, right?
and I had a conversation with Christopher Gregorio before. I was an Army recruiter for about 3.5 years, and then I was a career counselor for 5 years. So one of the biggest things that I'm most passionate about is, how do I help transitioning service members, veterans, military spouses, focus on their next step? What can I help them to look for their needs, wants, desires, so that they can focus on being successful post-military?
Right. And
so for
John
me, I'm very
Blanco,
passionate about that.
yeah, John, with that, I actually would like to, let's get on the DM here after the
Absolutely.
show, because that what you're doing is absolutely, something of interest for our community and for what we're doing here on the podcast. So, and I know John, I think John has a bit of a hard stop, Jon Macaskill, because we've been at this now for like an hour and 13, and he told me he had about 10 minutes ish. So, with that in mind, I want to be a good steward of his time. So I want to get back to Jon Macaskill, and then, if you have any more time, cool. Maybe for one more question, that's up to you, John.
Yeah, I've got a bail at the quarter after, so I'm looking at about 2 minutes out. So
okay,
probably a good safe spot to call it right here. But I do appreciate the opportunity to be here with you guys today. Scott, fantastic job. Sarah, always a pleasure, and the rest of you guys here, thank you very much for being a part of the audience. I got to say really quick to Christopher, it looks like you're wearing one of those funny umbrella hats, because the umbrella is right behind your hat, and I keep looking at that. I'm like, is he wearing an umbrella hat? No, but it looks like you're in a fun location. So good on you. I hope you're enjoying your time.
Well, hey, John, do that. I thought you were going to show up with your black cowboy hat.
That's back at the house. That's back at the house on the farm, man.
Yeah, I didn't see it, but I was looking for it. But yeah. Well, hey, brother, I appreciate your time. You were an easy interview. I mean, this was fantastic. Everyone I've had on has been top notch. Absolutely, you're right there at the top, and this has been enjoyable. I appreciate the fact that you came on and shared all the good things you did. So, hey, with that, God bless you and your family. Keep hitting them, and we'll see you next time around, brother.
All right, brother. Thanks again for having me. I appreciate it. Take care, everyone.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.
Adios.